Hey guys, welcome back. So we got Pat's truck here. So he brought it out here on a rollback because it wouldn't start. So we're gonna go over a couple little things you can do on your own to show you what you need to check before you just start ethering the crap out of it. So you can see I have the airbox already pulled apart here. We did some checks, but I'm gonna show you what you need to check. So we're gonna start this off this way. So I'll zoom in a little bit here for you so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'll show you with the camera what you need to do to check some things. You know, this truck's been sitting, I do believe, about 7 years. So hasn't ran in 7 years, maybe, but I know it's been sitting for at least that long. So it may have been started and moved here and there in the years, but it hasn't moved in the past couple. So the first thing you're gonna do is check your engine oil. So this thing's right at the bottom of the hash marks. However, it's got a pretty good lean to it. So the oil fill is good. The next thing you're going to check is your fuel filter up here if you have the original fuel system. Pull the filter out, make sure that you have fuel in the bowl. So if you don't have fuel in the bowl, you're not getting fuel to the injectors. Your second thing you need to do is check your high pressure oil reservoir. So I'll grab the camera and show that to you. So here's your reservoir, and you can see it's got a little bit of oil around it. So on a 96 and a 97, this is a 3/16 hex or Allen key bolt here. Okay, if you have a 94 or 95, it is a quarter drive, like an extension, like a ratchet. So if you have this one, take a long punch as big as you can get around this top of this bolt and smack it with a hammer. So what happens is these bolts, they get corroded into the aluminum because it's a steel bolt and it's sealed with an O-ring. So it's not like an NPT thread like the 94, 95 reservoirs are. So the 96, 97 has a straight thread with an O-ring. So it gets stuck in there. So what the easiest thing to do is take a punch, put your punch on there like this, and then smack the top of the punch, smacking the top of the bolt. So do that at least once, twice will do it good, and that bolt should come out of there without an issue. So this one was down about half to 3/4 of a quart, which is pretty low because these only hold a quart in the reservoir. So now that we have that filled up, we're not even going to try to crank it because this truck's been sitting for quite some time. He's been cranking on it. I can only imagine how much air is in this oil system. So the first order of business is unhook the glow plug relay. So if you have a 96 or a 97, this is the power side here. The way he has a stand core relay on here, it's not as easy to get to the non-hot side of the relay, the way he has it hooked up. So we unhooked the hot side and stuck it back here. If you think it's going to pop off of there, make sure that it's wrapped around with electrical tape or something so that it doesn't contact anything and ground out and short out. So if you have a 94 or a 95, you can simply unplug the glow plugs. There's an actual plug there. So we checked the fuel's good. We have oil in the engine. Now that we have the reservoir topped off, we went ahead, and since this has the S&B intake, we removed the top piece and then the snout and then also the air filter. So we're going to give this a little bit of starting fluid here as we're cranking it to see if it will spin fast enough to make enough oil pressure to start. All right, so we got somebody in there cranking for us. So go ahead and start cranking. Crank. All right. So the batteries are a little bit low on this. It's one thing I didn't check because he said he had put new batteries in it. So we're going to go ahead and get the jump pack out here and get some batteries on here because it's cranking pretty slow. It wants to fire over, but as you can tell, it doesn't sound real happy, which is not surprising because it doesn't sound like it's getting any fuel. So we're going to go ahead and get the charger out here, get these charging a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and try this again. All right, so we got the charger on here now. We're gonna give this another shot. Battery's got a little bit better charge in them. So go ahead and crank. Okay, so it was running on the ether there. Obviously, you don't want to gag it to death, but at that point, it should have ran. So at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and hook up the scan tool and see what it's actually telling me. So I'm going to have, we're going to go ahead and hook the scan tool up and then check the vitals here, because there's something telling this truck to not run, be it the computer or an IPR valve or an ICP or something like that. So it should have ran there. We did check the high pressure oil pump again before we started the crank again, and it was full to the top. So we know it's getting oil. The question is it using the oil? So we're going to do a couple more checks here and see what we come up with. All right, so we're going to show you something here real quick before the battery dies on my thing here. So we hooked the scan tool up. This is why I tell everybody they should have a scan tool. So you can see it says camshaft position circuit malfunction, performance, and then circuit intermittent. So he has the back pressure valve disconnected, so that's why you're getting those. Okay, so with that said, come out here. Let's take a look at the camshaft sensor, which is way down there. So let's see if we can get you to see what I want you to see. Finally got the camera to look down there. So that is the cam position cam position sensor, CPS. If you can see those wires, they ain't real happy. So we're going to go ahead and pull that off of there. I might have to get a new pigtail for it. We'll see if we can get this thing to fire up with just repairing that mess down there. But that'll definitely keep your truck from running. So, all right, so we got the truck pushed into the shop here, and we got the accessory bracket all off of here. So something I want to make note of is, so we have the tensioner sitting up here. All right, so this steel bolt threads into aluminum, so that sometimes can be a real pain to get off. So what I like to do is I like to smack this bolt with a hammer and a punch as best you can. It's tight to do down in here, but that'll kind of give it a little bit of a shock to get that tensioner bolt loosened up. So we went ahead and took the accessory bracket off. So you're probably wondering, why do we need to take the accessory bracket off to repair the wiring harness down here? Because you can get to that from under the truck. Well, if you look down through here, you can see that there's hoses, there's a steering stabilizer down there. You know, the pigtail plug and everything is down here, and it's behind the crank pulley and down underneath the water pump, and it's just difficult to get to. So even if you were to unplug it, you would still have to be doing everything in this small little space right here. So it literally took me about 10 minutes to get this accessory bracket off. So you take the accessory bracket off, and then you can see here the wiring harness is clipped into the water pump, and then it runs behind the exhaust back pressure tube, and then up into this harness here, which is also goes over to your coolant temp sensor, which is also into your back pressure sensor and your oil pressure sensor. So these are, well, senders, I should say. This is a sender and this is a sender. So, you know, if you unplug it down here, you can take it out of this clip. You can pull it out from behind the back pressure tube here, and then you have free reign to work on it in front of you. So we're going to go ahead and get that off of there and get it routed up through here, get that repaired. So as you can see here, we got the harness pulled up, and this is your typical mouse damage. Now, normally a lot of guys would like to just replace this pigtail. However, I can't get a pigtail today, so we're going to try to just repair this. Now, it is pretty close to the plug, which I'm not real happy about. You can see there's a nick in it there. So we're going to try and salvage this plug for now. If this isn't salvageable, then we'll go ahead and replace the pigtail. But this is your typical mouse damage. You can see that they've eaten the coating off. They've chewed into some wires. And just me pulling this plug up out of here actually broke the two wires off. So you know, these are color coded, so you know where they do need to be. So we're going to go ahead and strip these back, clean them up, solder this all together, and then marine grade heat shrink this together. Now we will have to add a little bit of wire in here just because of the damage to this wire here. So we'll be doing that as well. And there's not too much other mouse damage that I've noticed underneath here. We will have to put a little bit of repair to this wire, the alternator wire here. It was rubbing the back of the alternator and shorting out. So we'll go ahead and repair that as well. I'm gonna see if I can get the pins out of this plug and just slide some heat shrink over that. So hopefully that'll fix that without having to replace the actual pigtail. But this is our concern for the day. There's some other mouse damage, like I had said. You can tell they have eaten the positive cable here that you can't see, it's out of the frame. They were eaten on the cover for that. So we'll go ahead and get these cut up and stripped and hopefully repaired here. So you can see I got that stripped off there. There's some corrosion there. So we'll come all the way back to this neck and see what the wire looks like. So this is going to be a iffy repair here because of the wire condition. Looks like we're going to have barely enough to clean, barely enough good wire here to clean this and repair. So you can see that there's only a couple of strands sticking out past that first nick. So we're going to go ahead and cut that off. So this is what we have to deal with here. Like I said, if this isn't going to work real well, then we're going to go ahead and put a new pigtail on here. However, for now, I might pull the rubber insulator out of there just to make sure that we don't do any issues with that. But it should be okay if we have any problems. We're going to tin that first and get it real clean. So these wires aren't too bad. A little bit of corrosion on them. We'll get them all fluxed up and soldered here, and hopefully we'll be able to repair this. Like I said, with that wire being broken that close to the plug, this should be a pigtail replace. We may end up still replacing the pigtail. We're going to see. But this is a diagnostic purpose, because if you buy the pigtail, we're going to get a Ford one, and it's a couple bucks, plus you got to pay shipping, and then you got to wait for it. So even a tight situation, if you need to get your truck running and you had this issue, you can do this to get yourself by. But this is not, ideal repair here. So put a little bit of flux on here, heat up the wire a little bit, try to get it cleaned up as best we can. So just cleaning these wires up with this flux, a little bit of scratching with the iron. Make sure you get them pretty clean here. So the reason I'm messing with it so much is because we're still getting dirt out of the actual wire here. Because there is flux in the solder that I'm using. It's very little flux. It will clean as you solder it. So as you scratch it around and work that dirt out, it'll actually pick up that dirt and you just try to fling it out of there. Or if you have a desoldering bulb, you can use that, get it nice and hot, and then pull it out. Or if you want to wipe it with a towel after you solder it while it's still hot, you can wipe it down too. Because if you don't get all that dirt out of there, it will not solder. We can't use a crimp here because there's just not enough room. So you can see that they're nice and shiny now, no longer dirty. Not perfect, but this is good enough that it'll still make the connection, make the circuit happy. Shouldn't be any resistance in there now. So the next step here is we're going to have to clean these back, make sure that these are good. Like I said, we're going to have to add some wires. You can see these are different lengths here. So, and you can see all the loom got tore up. So what's nice is you can pull this out of loom and get a little bit extra, get whatever you need here. So we're going to go as far back as we need to. Don't want to remove more wire than we have to. But, you know, there is some corrosion in this wire. So we might end up cutting it back a little bit here and trying to make sure that we have a good solid connection here. So what I'm going to do first, since I know that this wire is the correct length, this is the only one this is the one that just had a broken nick in it. So we're going to go ahead and strip this one back here. So you can see that that's nice clean wire there. So we'll go ahead, strip this one, tin it, and add the extension to this to make it the same length as this one. That way it'll be a good basis for our length. I always flux and tin my wires. There are guys that don't do that, but I always flux and tin my wires. Now you'll notice I'm not using colored wire here. We're using different colored wire. However, I don't have these specific wires here. So I'm going to use 3 individual wires, but I'm also going to be heat shrinking the whole wire so that you will not see any of that color change before you get to the plug. So now, as I said, you want to have the same lengths here. So we're going to go ahead and trim this. We're going to make it a smidge longer, not much. So just a little bit longer like that. Because it's always better to have a little bit too much than not enough. But at the same time too, you don't want to have too much to where it will loop around and get stuck in the belt.
So there's still a little bit of corrosion in this wire.
So we might go ahead and cut this one back a little bit so we don't have such a short length of wire there to deal with. And plus that'll give it a better chance of being cleaner because we're farther away from where that hole was. So yeah, we went back that little bit. That wire's a lot cleaner back here, just that little bit distance. So we'll go ahead and do that then. So there's still a little bit of corrosion in there, but not nearly as much. This will give a much better solder joint. So we'll go ahead and get this other one cleaned up also. Like I said, you can see the red one's longer, but that's fine because we're going to go ahead and shorten this guy up too, and then make sure that we heat shrink this whole piece. So we'll go ahead and trim this guy back a little bit here as well. Make sure we get to some better wire. I like to give these a good tug, make sure that they're connected well. So now that we have these on here, now we have this other wire here, the pigtail, I'm sorry. So we need to match these colors back up. But before we do that, okay, take your heat shrink and make sure that you can get it down over all of your joint and everything. So, make sure it fits down over the joint, which this one's going to be a little bit tight, but that's perfect. So we'll slide this down as far as we need to get it out of the way here, and do that to all three. Now this is marine grade heat shrink, so it does have the goo inside it, so we don't need to worry about corrosion at any point. So that's why we're doing it this way. Okay, so now that we have our heat shrink on there, now we can go ahead and say, okay, well, this is how long this guy is here. So we have, now I'm not good with colors, so we're just going to use the colors that I see. So it looks like a gray, a green, and then a brown with a stripe. What colors these actually are, I'm not real sure. So our gray one here is A, so that black goes to A. And then the one with the stripe is in the middle, so that'd be this red one here. And then that leaves our last one to the green color. So we know that this is how long this one needs to be. You can see it's a little bit shorter. So we'll go ahead and we will adjust that length in the plug. So we know how long this red one needs to be. The red one's going to go to this middle pin here, so that'll be the longest one. Okay, so the green and the black should be the same length overall. So the green one goes to C on here, the way I have this set up. So we want that to go here. You want to make this about the same, a little bit longer on these ones. So we'll go ahead and trim that guy to make sure it's a little bit longer. And then this red one's going to be the longest because it goes in the middle here. So you can line it up and then cut your excess and then drop your plug in the process. After you retrieve your plug that you've dropped, you can set it aside. Go ahead and strip these wires and tin all of them. Okay. So once you've had these tinned, you can take your plug, make sure your colors are going to line up here. So the red with the stripe is in the middle for this plug. So we'll go ahead and solder this together here, and then we'll work on the other two. Okay. So that's the worst one. So we'll give it a good tug, and then you can go ahead and match your other wire colors up. So we have, like I said, there's like a gray color, which I made black, which is A on here. So we'll go ahead and solder these two together. Now this is where this can become tricky because you're trying to hold a plug. So because I don't have a holding station, and then also solder these wires together. I'm sure there's guys watching this saying that I should be doing something differently and that there's another way to do this. And I'm almost positive there's more than one way to solder wires together. So if this isn't the way you do it, by all means, do it the way you feel comfortable. Because I'm just demonstrating the project, not exactly telling you this is the way you should absolutely do it, unless I tell you that's the absolute way you should do it. That's the difference. All right. So give all these a good tug, make sure that they're connected good and tight. And we put the heat shrink on earlier. So the only thing that I can suggest to you now is take your cleaner and try to get as much of this flux off as possible. So you get the flux off of there, the flux can be corrosive over time. So we're going to go ahead and clean this off and then put the heat shrink on. Okay, so once you clean all your flux off of there, you can go ahead and slide your heat shrinking tubing up over your joints. So like I said, we put enough heat shrink tubing on here to cover these colored areas here. That way you don't have a change in color that you're tracing. You can just follow it right to the plug. Okay, just like so. Now, I suggest having a heating iron of some sort, not a heating iron. I suggest having a, well, this is actually for heat shrink, this piece here. But they make ones that can go on a butane torch or a heating element specifically for this. However, if you use a torch with fire, use the actual flame, it will work. However, you run the risk of burning the heat shrink, and you don't want to burn the heat shrink. Okay, so when you're doing marine grade, you want to make sure that you heat this up until you see the ooze come out the ends. And as you can see there, it covers up both connections, seals them up really, really well. So we'll let that cool off there. And then we're going to go ahead and try to get this harness fixed up here. So we'll try to get that torn apart. All right, so the alternator plug here, you can see there's 3 wires going into it. And then at the other end there, you got a red retainer here. So take a pick, you pop this red retainer out. Do not lose that. All right, because we are not cutting these wires. We want to repair them. Okay, so either take a picture or make a mental note or do one at a time. Okay, we're not going to take this middle one out. We're going to start with this one over here. So there's little clips inside here. You put your pick in like so, and then pull like this, and the pin will come out the back as such. All right, so we're going to do one of these at a time. Now I need to find heat shrink that's going to fit over this wire end, which I think I have some here. So we'll see if it'll fit. And no, so we'll have to go to a next size up to get it over this pin. Okay, so we got the next size up here. See if that one fits over, and it does go over. So now check and make sure you don't have any other nicks in your wire to make sure that you don't need to get any farther up or down. So it looks like we just need a little short piece on here. So it doesn't need to be this long. So we'll go ahead and trim this piece up. Slide it down over. We'll slide it down to where the nick is in the wire. And then we can go ahead and put it back in. Now, when you go to put this back in, it will only go a certain way. So I don't know how well you can see that, but it needs to be like this. You push it back in through the rubber, and then it'll click back into place. So it won't come out. Okay? So the other one had a nick in it as well. So we will go ahead and pull that one out also. So same thing. Take your pick, and you'll want to slide it down the top of the connector until you feel a stop, and there's a catch there, and then pull down, and then you should be able to pull that right out of there, just like so. Okay, and you see it came out this way. So make sure you put it back in the same way. Once again, make sure that you don't have any other nicks anywhere in the wire, and slide your heat shrink down over. And then you can go ahead and place it back in your connector. And you'll hear it click. Once you're done with that, make sure you put your retainer back in. It only goes one way, so make sure you put it back in the same way. Okay, now that we have our heat shrink down here, we can go ahead and shrink those down. So you can see it takes a little bit of heat to get that glue to come out. And that's why I suggest using a hot air source instead of an open flame. So that repairs that. So while you have this all apart, you want to double check and make sure you have no more nicks in your wiring anywhere. We can put the loom back on the cam position wiring, and we'll go ahead and put a piece of tape around it to hold that loom on there so it doesn't get caught up, because it is very close to the belt, the way that they have this routed from the factory. So we're going to leave this chewed up loom on here because it'll give that connection a little bit of stability. But we'll put some tape on here. So just double check all your wiring, make sure that you don't have any cut wires or anything like that, and then reinstall it back the way it should be. Now, this plug here, you can see it has a broken connector on it here. The retainer is broken for the alternator. So if this poses a problem, which it can, this will set your battery light on your truck. You can go ahead and replace this whole pigtail. It is available. You can buy it aftermarket. So you can replace it instead of doing the heat shrink repair, which we did down here because it was only a nick in the coating. Basically just want to keep this from shorting out on the alternator because it will eventually cut through the wire and cause you a no charge scenario on your truck, and you can be chasing it forever and it just be a broken wire back here that you can't tell. So you can replace this plug if need be, but this plug was not needing to be replaced, so we left it. So we'll go ahead and reinstall this back the way that it should be and put the accessory bracket on and try to fire it up. Okay, so we have this all put back together now. I have the key on. I've cleared the codes out of the computer, and we're going to go ahead and see if it'll start. Now, we still have the glow plugs unhooked, but we have everything repaired down here as far as wiring goes. Still, we don't have the air filter in and stuff like that. I really don't want to give this a shot of starting fluid if we don't have to, but we're going to go ahead and see if it'll crank over and start. So as previously in the video, we checked the high pressure oil reservoir and it is full, it is pumping, it is filling. So that means that the high pressure oil system is full. So when we started this video, the high pressure oil reservoir was low. So that's why whenever we started this video with getting it started, I went right to that because that's my first check when I do these trucks is check the high pressure oil reservoir. If the reservoir is low, then we add it and see if it'll crank over and then try to get it running that way, because if the high pressure oil system is drained low, has a lot of air in it, it will almost always take ether to get it running quickly and fast. That way you don't torch a starter. So that's why we started it this way. Once we realized that the high pressure oil system was doing well, the batteries were good and charged, and we had everything in check, all the checks ruled out, then we went ahead and said, okay, well, let's check the computer, because there was no check engine light, which I thought was really strange. So I did double check to make sure the check engine light turns on when you turn the key on, and it does. So not real sure why the cam position sensor was not throwing a check engine light, but it was not. So I'm hoping that it's going to start here. So we're going to go ahead. We already have the key on. I'm just going to jump the starter solenoid here and see if it'll fire up. Hope it works. So as you can see, it's not having it. So we might have to give it a little bit of ether to get it rolling here. So we'll go ahead and give that a shot. First thing we're going to do though is we're going to check the high pressure oil reservoir again to make sure that it's full. So the high pressure oil reservoir is not absolutely full, but it's far enough up there that it should do the job. So once again, we don't have the glow plugs hooked up here, so that could be the issue here. So I'm going to go ahead and hook those back up real quick. Now that, because we were using starting fluid in the previous area of the video here. So we'll go ahead and hook that back up. And we'll see if that makes a difference. Because now we're getting, I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but we're getting white smoke out around the exhaust clamp here. So we're just going to put that on snug. We'll tighten it up with a wrench here. Went ahead and cycled the key. I'm still going to run this out here so I can see what's going on with the engine in case something were to go wrong. Let that key sit on there for a little bit with the glow plugs energized. Hopefully it'll start. There we go. He's running. Doesn't sound too bad. So no check engine light on here. Everything seems to be okay. Oil pressure's good. No funny noises. I call it a success. So thanks for watching, guys. We're going to let this truck run for a little bit longer. Make sure that it's going to be okay. Get some fluids moving in it again. So we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.